Hi Dinesh.
Hi Chengying.
Welcome to Shoestring Productions. This is Pro Bono SG's in-house production studio. Congratulations on being appointed as our chairman.
It's a real honor and privilege.
Really excited to see you take up this position because you've been journeying with this access to justice mission for so long. Yeah, and I'm really interested to know, how did you get started?
How did I get started now? Taking it back to when I started practice, I was called in 1995. Now, I didn't actually volunteer through Law Society or Pro Bono till much later, but I did already have some involvement through my church. They set up a family service center. I played a role of legal advisor to that family service center. It reached the community. There were social workers. Sometimes there would be cases they would come to me as a young lawyer. And yeah, I remember going through the experience of running to most senior members of the bar. What do we do here? What can we do? How can we help? And I can't remember the specifics of all the cases, but it's a long time ago. But yeah, it already touched me a bit there. But more recently, it would be about 11 years ago, 2013, 2014, I felt a need to volunteer again. I started to volunteer on some cases through Law Society Pro Bono, a few criminal cases, mainly more on the civil side. But on a bigger scale, how I got involved was in 2014, I volunteered to be on the Just Walk committee, which was chaired by Lok Bimeng, Senior Counsel. And I remember Josephus was also on that committee. And being with them and others in that committee, well, it was infectious. Definitely, Bimeng is very infectious. His enthusiasm for Pro Bono, it inspired me. And the passion he put into making sure we had a walkathon at time that still rivals the ones we're trying to do now. It was super successful, the one in 2015, Just Walk. And that made me think, what more could I do? And, well, I had this love for music that you're familiar with. My wife used to run a concert promotion company, did many shows at the Esplanade, and I was thinking to myself, could we do something along the lines of what led to Just Sing? I think Just Sing was in 2016, but how it happened was I actually pitched the idea to Shenny, who was then the president of Law Society. I remember he summoned me into a council meeting. I was not on council. I pitched it to council. Council liked it. The next thing you know, I was co-opted. I was in council, and that was my first project. And I enjoyed doing that a lot because I involved my classmate, Rani Singham, who is a national treasure in music. And she led the whole project, and we involved other musicians who are also from the bar or lawyers, like Chok Karong. A lot of people don't realize he is an NUS law graduate, and then former teachers from NUS like Jimmy Ye and others, like the band Cheating Sons, had a lot of members from the profession as well. I remember they were associates from Wong Partnership. So it all came together. It was a fantastic show, bringing the community together. And I think it's beyond just being a show. We help to bring the message of Pro Bono to a wider community.
I remember this concert. I was there.
Yes,
in fact, I think you gave me tickets because I was working in your team at that time.
That's true.
It was a beautiful concert.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful concert. And I love how people can be brought together through their individual passions, right? Like love for music, movement, walking. Yeah. And I like your story of how momentum built upon momentum, going from a walkathon to a music concert. And what's next?
Well, what's next? Well, we've had quite a few what's next after that. We had Just Makan. That was another one of my ideas.
Self-explanatory.
And then we had Just Duet. Just Duet was another one of the ideas I conceived. And I'm particularly proud of that project because then we went and we partnered with Timber, who is a well-known company involved in the music industry in Singapore. Local musicians had just come out of the COVID experience, so they got to earn something from being part of something meaningful as well. And the whole concept of Just Duet, well, you can still find it, I think, on YouTube. It was so special to see people who are regarded as our beneficiary class, the domestic migrant workers, duet with lawyers. So you break away that stigma, that wall, so to speak, and you see that actually we can sing and make music together, and that's part of the cause we're doing as well, to break down this sort of barriers so that we can build proximity between the volunteers and the people who benefit.
Do you think building proximity, fostering that close relationship, building trust, are these things important in pro bono work?
They are critical. And my inspiration for that actually comes from a book I also read more than 10 years ago called Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. He's a pro bono legend in America. He formed the Equal Justice Initiative. And when I read his book, one of the first few things he talked about that made a big impression on me is he talked about the need for proximity. And it occurred to me how absent that was from myself, because even though we're in a small island, everybody is, in such a small place, we still tend to, by nature, know people of our own profession, or if not our own profession, professionals know professionals, and so on. You don't really know people from different socioeconomic backgrounds.
Circle, yeah.
So, like when it comes to migrant workers, they come from overseas, different language, different culture. They have incurred huge cost debts to come here. They feel insecure, naturally. They feel culturally alienated. So, part of that, if you want to serve them, you got to get proximate to them. You got to build ties, build friendships. And you talk about that domino effect. There you have the genesis of ideas that are not just mine. They come from our whole board, like the cricket tournament we did. Yes. That had lawyers playing next to migrant workers, playing cricket together. You break down walls, you build friendships, you build trust. And that is critical. That's the vision for things like that. And yes, the answer to your question is proximity is super important, because I think also that you build, when it comes to pro bono, you understand from the bottom up. You need to understand the person, each individual, their issues, not as some vague tribal group, but as people and individuals themselves. Then you can really try to help them.
Yeah. And I love how building proximity is not so difficult, right? You can actually do it through something like a common love for sports.
Yep.
And
or music.
Yes, or music, or food for just
yes,
makan.
Food, yes. Yeah.
So Dinesh, just now you spoke about the need to build proximity with some of the more vulnerable groups that may find it difficult to actually get access to lawyers and to services. And I know that you've personally done a lot of casework as well with some of these vulnerable groups. For example, low-income transnational families, stateless persons, and you're also very involved in our migrant worker initiatives. So could you share with us, some of the work that you have done and the challenges that you face?
I'll start with the transnational cases. I think you would remember it well. You worked with me on, I think, what was one of my first cases involving the triplets. That was 9 years ago. That need actually came to my awareness purely because my wife got a call from a friend who worked in Queenstown Methodist Church who knew of the case. And then I contacted Tongi, who then said, let's do this under Pro Bono ad hoc scheme. And we did it. And I think that made me aware that there are such cases in Singapore. And the lesson I learned from cases like that, because others came my way after that, is that these individuals, they really need help with getting their case across factually so that they can sift through what is really relevant. They need your help. They can't do it without you. And these are delicate areas. There are important policy considerations. So the least you can do as a pro bono lawyer is to get the right facts across to the decision maker. That's all we can really do, because ultimately, then the decision will, that's not really so much in our hands, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also mentioned migrant workers. I think that one came to my mind more during the COVID times. It was the whole national consciousness.
Yes, there was a spotlight on the issue.
Came up, and we realized that how can we do more? And I think that was the genesis of the Migrant Worker Legal Committee that I chair to this date with Gregory. And I'm really excited by where we've gotten, because this collaboration we now have with NTUC, which we've signed, their Migrant Worker Centre, to open a dedicated centre in Serangoon Road catered to migrant workers. And there you have it, you see, proximity again. It's a lot to ask migrant workers to come out to Havelock Road to see us here, but you go to where they are.
Yes, delivering services where people actually are,
yes,
to make it easy for them to get help.
Yes,
and removing the barriers in terms of like psychological barriers as well, right?
And you asked me about difficulties I faced when I started. I think I touched on one element of it, and this is a constant, even as a senior member of the bar. When you want to do pro bono, when a case comes across your path that you know nothing about, I didn't know anything about immigration policy, transnational issues. I had to start to learn from scratch, rely a lot of valuable research from people like you who were also learning from scratch at the time, and then we helped to figure it out and just put together the best case. And I think that goes back to how we work together as a legal profession, because even in the criminal sphere, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I've done a few pro bono criminal cases, and I really needed the help of members of the bar who do this regularly, reach out to them, and that's how we help each other. In the end, we help the person in need.
So what would you say to young lawyers that are thinking about getting started on pro bono work but not so sure about whether they should start?
I think that young lawyers should definitely get involved with pro bono work. Sooner the better. Even as a law student, you can already get involved. You can volunteer, you can do internships, and you can just be conscious within your community of people in need and the fact that there's a service out there to help them. And even if you're not the one doing the legal service at that given point in time, if you're the community support by way of care, compassion, being a friend to that person because they are someone that came through your connection or you knew of this case, then I think that plays a big part too. And a message I would like to convey is, when you start out in professional life, looking back, my one advice is the joy is in the journey. It's not really in the destination. You see, a lot of times when you start, people tell you, what's your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan? It's good to have these plans. It's good to set these targets. But if your targets are just orientated around, I want to have this kind of house, I want to have this kind of income, I want to have this status as partner or whatever. These are all good things to want, and to bless your family with and all that. But if you don't focus on the opportunities as you journey, you're going to miss a lot of things. You could get to your destination and how come I didn't feel I really had meaning and purpose? Because along the way, there could be someone like that Chinese national who had triplets that, thankfully I was paying attention to the conversation my wife was having, and I went outside of my normal professional practice area to help. And it has made my life so enriched. I am enriched by that experience, not just the beneficiary.
So when you give, you also receive.
100%. I mean, you were on the case. How did you feel about having an outcome? Yeah.
It's true. When you showed me the photo of the triplets recently,
yes,
9 years old, when I last carried them, they were babies. I felt something.
I still get a Christmas greeting every Christmas. I get a new picture. I get a Chinese New Year greeting, and to know that they're in primary school, that they've gotten that opportunity. You see, we can't guarantee equal outcomes for everybody in life, but we can give them that opportunity, and that's what moves me about these transnational cases. We want to, do our best to fight for that opportunity for them, to give them that chance.
Yes, because ultimately it is also about equality, right? It is also about being fair to everyone who's living in Singapore.
Yes.
And these are actually values that seem very integral to pro bono work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Justice, equality, yes.
Yes, which I also found in our national pledge. I remember we were having a conversation and you were sharing with me that lawyering is actually critical to nation building, and I was very intrigued by this concept because I never equipped lawyering as being a particularly patriotic job.
I feel quite strongly about this, and let me start a bit with our name. This charity since 2022 is Pro Bono SG. Before that, we were Law Society, Pro Bono Services. We were once within the Law Society before we became a subsidiary. Now, it's important to understand this decision to become Pro Bono SG was discussed on the committee. Deciding it was our late President Adrian Tan. He was key to deciding that this name is what's going to work, Pro Bono SG. The logo you see, he was instrumental in helping to shape that logo. It's very much his legacy, Pro Bono SG, in that way too. And it links to my answer, because why the SG? Why the shift from Law Society to SG? This was a bit controversial when it was done. I think you might recall.
The Law Society prefix.
I want to first emphasize, there's no dropping of Law Society. We are joined at the hip. No Law Society, no bar, no Pro Bono. It's over. Okay? This is a given. Pro Bono SG works closely with Law Society Council. We work together. Okay? But coming back to your question, let me start with our national flag. You got red. What does that red symbolize? Universal brotherhood, equality. That's
Not
what
blood.
it's meant to. Because regardless of race, language, or religion, we bleed the same. So I think it's quite symbolic for that too. So then is the white, which stands for purity, integrity. Everything I've just said, isn't that sound like the values of the legal profession? Equality, which is the red, and then you have the white, integrity, purity. Now, you got the 5 stars. Justice, equality, peace, progress, and democracy. Now again, justice and equality is on our stars. You want to see how all this works together? You go back to that pledge we say every day in school. We say it every single day when we were growing up. We the citizens of Singapore pledge ourselves regardless of race, language, or religion to build a democratic society. And I emphasize these words, based on what? Justice and equality, our core mission values, based on justice and equality, so as to achieve happiness, prosperity, and progress for our nation. Justice and equality seems to be very foundational. You don't get anything unless you have that, right? So I see our mission as a very national-based mission, and to give an example of what I mean by that, it's very practical. I was recently reading the biography by Susan Sim of our late founding father E.W. Barker, our first law minister. And there's a page that stuck with me. He was speaking in Parliament. It was some debate to do with an amendment to the Legal Professional Act. And what the point he made was that he said this, he was comparing lawyers, I think a bit tongue-in-cheek, with doctors, engineers, architects, and he was saying, lawyers, they help the government with the administration of Singapore. A doctor will cure disease, engineer will build, construct, architect will draw, but the lawyers, they help with the whole administration of Singapore. And what did he mean by that? I mean, his actual words were, if I remember correctly, were the lawyers help the government run the place. And by this, he's not just talking about pro bono lawyers. It's all lawyers. It's our profession, and it's rightfully a very valuable service people should pay for. But the examples he gave, he said from birth, there may be issues of legitimacy.
Which we still see today.
Death, he said, you may have issues to deal with in terms of estate. In between, you could have an injury, you could have an accident, whatever you have to deal with.
Mental capacity.
You need your lawyer. And it just struck me from his words that what about the citizen or the person living here at the time who doesn't have means? If they don't get access to a lawyer, the system breaks down for them, doesn't it? So it goes back to that thing, justice, equality, and progress for that individual and progress as a nation. It's in his words, it's the message that he was really sending. And if I were to personalize it to my own pro bono cases about birth, well, the triplets, we did the case. Their whole issue of what citizenship was at stake. And
they needed it to unlock.
And they needed the pro bono lawyer to help them. There's another case I did more recently, and I had to go to court for this one. It concerned issues of presumption of death. A family which didn't have means, the father had died while overseas. He had cancer, he went overseas, some remote village in India, he dies. And they didn't have the usual evidence of his death. So this family, who was very poor, they were in the relevant means class, no access to his CPF, no access to the ability to transfer the only asset, the HDB. Do you realize how locked out of the system they are? And this was a complicated application to court. If they had to pay for it, it cost a lot of money because we spent a lot of time. There were few hearings before the relevant judge of the High Court, because there were some important issues. When do you presume someone dead? So it's important. Mr. Barker's, the late Mr. Barker's words literally came to life through my own pro bono experience. And it would be remiss of me not to talk a little bit when you talk about why I think it's relevant to nation building, without mentioning what I think is one of the greatest speeches I heard during my lifetime by the late founding father Lee Kuan Yew. In 2009, he gave a speech in Parliament that was centered around a debate regarding our pledge, our national pledge. And I think the issue in hand was, what status do you give this pledge? Do you enshrine it, the values in the Constitution? Everybody was talking about how valuable it is, as it is. And then he came in at the end and he gave this speech, and I've watched it several times in my life. I never tire of watching it because it's so much wisdom there. He actually said that I need to bring this house back to earth. And then he said our pledge is not an ideology, it's an aspiration. And at first, I've since then heard a lot of people tell me when they talk about this speech that, the pledge is therefore less important, for some reason. But I think if you take that approach, you miss his point completely. because he went on to say, will we ever attain it, meaning the pledge? And his words were, I do not know, but we must. This is his words, but we must keep trying. So in other words,
that's the key message.
That's the key message. In other words, I think what his point was is, this is not the kind of thing, this kind of national values, which are the values of our profession, okay? It's not the kind of thing you can embed on some tablet, put on some stone wall in Parliament. You need to say it every day in school. That's the first step. But then it needs to be transformed into how you live your life, the values that you pass on to your kids. There's a reason they wanted us to say it every day in school, but there's a reason he was sounding a note of caution, saying, what do you mean put it in the Constitution? It needs to be inside here. I think that that's the same message I want to send young lawyers. You ask me about young lawyers or all lawyers. You miss out on something very valuable about your profession and how it relates to nation building itself if you miss this.
That's such a valuable insight. And I think that message is equally applicable actually for people outside the profession. Because the wider community, sometimes they may not understand how pro bono services, is something that they should support, because it's so difficult to understand how the law may relate to someone who has never experienced a legal problem, for example, and why they should support it. But hearing you speak about how lawyers are involved in everything from cradle to grave services, and how the law basically underpins every facet of our lives, right?
Yes.
Governing important relationships with family, with your employer, with the state itself. When a person can't access legal services, you mentioned the system breaks down for them.
Yes.
And I think it just struck me, it breaks down completely because of how the law governs so many different aspects of your life.
And don't forget the ripple effect. It doesn't just break down for that individual. It's their family members too.
It's true.
I mean, we have seen cases. Sometimes people could be victims of, unfortunately, they're stuck in a drug habit or something, and that's the offense you're dealing with. But inside that family unit, I'm sure we have all seen cases. There's a child trying to go to primary school. There's a wife trying to make ends meet.
Yes.
And this is where you asked me about, you just mentioned, the wider community. In the last few years, Pro Bono SG has been working very hard to build relationships with other NGOs, because the solutions are not always just legal. We need to work with them, and sometimes it's through them that we find out about the cases, right? Through the church welfare organization or the mosque or the temple. It all comes together, and we all got to play our part as a community.
Dinesh, you spoke about how other organizations, religious organizations, places of worship, social service agencies, other NGOs are critical to our work because they bring such cases to our attention, and they're very often the frontliners. Do you have a message for the broader community on how pro bono services is actually relevant to them and why they should support it?
I think that for the broader community, at the end of the day, if we want progress, so to speak, as a nation, a lot of the cases that come their way, the people who come to them seeking help, they may be the first port of call that the needy person goes to.
Yes.
But I think this is partly our own mission too. We need to make ourselves, our existence, make it very second nature to these other NGOs and other institutions, so they
Proximity.
So they know where to come. And they need to know what's our mission. I mean, our mission is really access to justice, is giving that individual representation and so on. So I think in that sense, there is a need for us to work as a community, to understand each other's strengths towards this broader goal of helping an individual in need or a family in need.
Yes, because needs can be so complicated, right? They can be so multifaceted, so diverse. Lawyers definitely can't provide the solution to every single kind of problem that these individuals face.
I mean, if you talk about our volunteers sometimes go through a lot. When you are in this field, volunteering, you've done the cases. I know sometimes you get greatly inconvenienced. It's just a reality. It's not all, roses along the way. Sometimes the person you are trying to help, for some reason, whatever reason, just feels like gives you a hard time trying to help them. But you may therefore suffer your own stress and so on. And that's why I think even we need support from maybe psychological support agencies, some form of avenue for our own volunteers, for their own wellness, because you can't take on all the problems onto yourself. We need to help each other as we help others, and we also have our own careers to build. You can't do it all. You will be completely eroded.
Yeah, community building, right? Within the pro bono, within our pro bono practice as well. Yeah. Just like you mentioned, how senior lawyers have assisted you when you were a young lawyer, and I think you have also paid it forward by mentoring many of our junior lawyers as well.
Yes, and this mentoring thing, I'm concerned to make sure that we pass it on effectively, because times have changed. When I was in practice, there was this beautiful place called the bar room. People are always there. You enter, there are always these senior wise old men around wise older lawyers. You can tap on their expertise. You can even just go with your problem on the day itself and say, what to do about this? And there's someone with advice. I'm not sure the culture is as similar now with all the technology, people doing online hearings and people being on the move so much more, or even when they're in a bar room, are they just, looking at the phone or something, so we need to be proactive of making sure there are access to the wisdom of our past. We need to be very proactive about preserving that and being able to continue to tap on it. Yeah.
Seems like the building proximity theme also extends into mentoring as well.
100%. Because really, what are we about? I touched on values. We're actually about passing on these values of the bar. That's it. You keep the values, pro bono will stay alive for years and generations to come. It's not about this scheme alone. The schemes may change, the needs, the areas may change. The values will drive the willingness to serve the
spirit of the profession.
Yes.
Moving on to our next topic. Through the years, I've seen Pro Bono SG innovating, changing the ways in which we engage the public and raise awareness of our work as well. And we have, for example, Just Jalan coming up. Yeah, would you like to share a little bit more about Just Jalan and what we can expect?
Well, I'll share about two things which lead to Just Jalan. I think one of the things about impact that I'm very excited about is Pro Bono Weeks. We are launching Pro Bono Weeks just next week, in fact, on Monday, 13th of January, to coincide with the opening of legal year. And we plan to keep this going every year moving forward. The idea is to embed this pro bono ethos that has been passed down from the past, moving forward to the next generation, and to also create awareness with the wider community. So our first event, I'm quite excited, will be at Singapore Management University at SMU, and we'll have some of our pro bono ambassadors speaking with law students, young trainees, and practitioners who have just started out. So this will culminate. There'll be other events too, reaching out to the local bar, the international bar that's in Singapore. We are an international city with lawyers from all over the world, and they are all very supportive of pro bono. And we end with Just Jalan on the 8th of February.
Yep.
Now, Just Jalan is actually, its genesis is Just Walk, which I volunteered on years ago, but I came up with the idea of changing the name to Just Jalan, and the board bought into it. I like the name not just for the JJ ring, just Jalan, but I like it because the word Jalan is quite nuanced. It has more than one meaning to it. On one level, we think Jalan, you go for a walk, so it sounds like just walk, but the meaning is also to forge a pathway. And that's actually what pro bono is. You are forging a pathway, access to justice. And we do it every year. Why? Because it's very symbolic of you got to keep forging that pathway. If you don't keep walking it, past, present, subsequent generations, the weeds will grow, the path is lost. So that's kind of the message symbolically in my own heart about Just Jalan, which has been great success last year. And I'm looking forward to 8th of February.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I like how it's also symbolic of some of the personal journeys that our volunteers and supporters take as they embark on this journey and grow with that sense of purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
Dinesh, you're the new chairman of Pro Bono SG, and I feel that you have inherited such an important legacy and such an immense responsibility as well. Since 40 years ago, we've had senior leaders of the bar, including the late Mr. Harry Elias, starting the criminal legal aid scheme. Then we have had other senior lawyers advocating for the launching of PBSO, the Pro Bono Services Office within the Law Society, to centralize and do our pro bono work better. And then we have had our former chairman as well, Gregory Vijayendran, Senior Counsel, who also led with such exemplary leadership and also spearheaded so many important initiatives. So I wanted to ask you, What is your vision, for Pro Bono SG as its new chairman?
I see this chairmanship really as a position of trust, as a position of having to steward this legacy that belongs to the whole bar. Ultimately, it's not just me, it's the work of a whole community of lawyers, the whole bar who came together in years gone by.
Generations
of lawyers to build a legacy of contributing to nation building, to justice, equality, making sure it's accessible to all so that we can progress together. That's what I see as on me to help ensure we carry on. So in terms of the minutiae, of course, we will have programs for that. We have Pro Bono Weeks. We have to engage all the key people who will be our volunteer base for the future, and presently again, lawyers, law students, the international legal community in Singapore as well, and also other NGOs and so on who we will cooperate with in providing a more holistic solution to problems, especially that we are now also in areas like community lawyering, the focus on the migrant workers, and so on. But I think with the move to our, the name shift, so to speak, although I still see the responsibility as growing what we have already established, Pro Bono SG, I would like to see a greater engagement with wider Singapore. So I would like to keep building on what has been started in the last few years of seeing ourselves becoming more known to the community, and the community beginning to realize how our mission is their mission too. Everybody said it in school, right? Justice, equality, the pledge, these values are Singaporean values. So even if you're not the lawyer, to have an understanding of the need for such services, why it's important to greater national objectives, is part, I think, of the mission. Because otherwise, in the long term, people will just see this as the lawyer's charity, but it's more than that. It's lawyers are integral to it, but so is everybody else. Yeah.
And how do you think we should build this awareness amongst the wider community?
I think that there's nothing more powerful than stories. I think that one of the benefits of the world we live in now, the social media world, that is, the negative side is obviously there, but it gives us the ability to communicate stories very efficiently. So I think that we should preserve our legacy in terms of people who've contributed in the past. We should get those stories across to inspire the next generation. Another message I have for young lawyers, because I feel we are in a world today where narratives flow so quickly. The mass media is what it is. News cycles are faster than they've ever been. News comes in all forms that sometimes you wonder, is this really news? And actually lawyers have a very unique role, and this should be the ethos of every lawyer. When you build a case, a pro bono case or any case, build it on evidence, on facts. Don't build it purely on the narrative of the issue or the cause, because it's very easy to run with the cause and think you're fighting for justice. But if you get your facts wrong, it's all a waste of resources. You've got to get your facts right in each case. And this is a problem not just in Singapore. I see this problem developing, that people tend to focus more on narratives or issue-driven advocacy rather than fact-based or evidence-based advocacy. So yeah, I also think that the mentorship element, which I touched on earlier, is also key. Being able to effectively mentor the younger generation. So we need to keep moving together. It's not like I'm creating a legacy or who came before me immediately created one or who comes after. The legacy has come with, since the nation started, and even before that, there were lawyers in Singapore who cared about the lesser off. That is part and parcel of what it means to be a lawyer. So if you talk about legacy, I think late Adrian Tan, again, I mentioned him again, there's a quote that he wrote in a piece in the Law Gazette about meaning in life. I forget the exact words, but he talked about how, when you've lived your life, if you have told other people's stories, served others,
enriched the lives of others.
Enriched the life of others, it's a life of meaning and purpose. And I mean, everybody was inspired by those words. We would do well to remember them, because that says it all. in terms of legacy. We will be completely lost when we lose this vision of what it means to be a lawyer or what it means to be a person. Because as human beings, I've come to realize, I mean, we get the most meaning from service, from actually helping others. If you go through life and you miss the opportunity to serve others, you miss the opportunity for actually living, if that makes sense.
If I recall, his quote mentioned that this is a life of service and that he would commend it to others.
Yeah. So we should keep commending it. I mean, his words should be remembered. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have a particularly memorable moment, or a particularly defining moment in this pro bono journey that you have been jalaning on for over a decade?
It could be because you are right before me at this point that I remember this comes to mind straight away.
Okay.
I still remember very well you coming very quickly. I think you might even been running to my room.
Oh wow, that's right. Maybe that's why you remembered it.
But you were coming very quickly and your face was really happy and you said, "We've got the citizenship." I think you remember that day for the triplets in that case we did. And I think if you talk about impact, the look on your face, the feeling I got when I heard that, that's impact, right? It has enriched our lives. We have made a difference in other people's lives. And it has fueled our journey. I think I speak for myself, that one case fueled my journey along to take on further cases because it's really worthwhile.
It's true.
Yeah.
And you continue to jalan.
Yeah. Exactly.
With many other families.
Exactly. And this is just one story. I think one point that you asked me about my one story, I gave you one moment, but can you imagine how many moments like that are untold in our bar?
Yeah.
That's one thing I miss Adrian Tan again about. He used to tell the stories and he's so gifted at doing that.
Yeah, he told them so well.
In like all things in life, it's what gets often reported is when things go wrong. It's always in the papers when a lawyer has messed up or whatever, disciplinary issues, these are highlighted. But I think a lot of the small things that lawyers do day to day on a voluntary basis, or even when they're doing their normal jobs, people forget how much meaning and purpose there is in this profession. And I think part of Pro Bono SG's mission, part of Pro Bono Weeks and all that is to keep these stories alive, to inspire and to keep these stories going, because the returns are a multiplier effect. As I was saying, to the family you benefit.
That's intergenerational.
It's intergenerational. When you're going to see returns beyond from when you go, to what the difference you made to their lives.